What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over how to make Hitstun and essentially blockstun in today's episode of the fighting game tutorial. So, we're only going to be focusing on Hitstun simply for the fact that we don't have blocks implemented. That will probably be next episode, and we will incorporate blockstun with it. However, Hitstun essentially is the same as blockstun, except blockstun is what happens when the player is blocking. So, we are not going to handle freezing the frame or kind of pausing the game for a second upon hit. Usually this would happen in a polished fighting game, and we will cover it, but this is a little bit too complex for what we're doing at the moment. So, what we're going to do is we're going to attack our player, and he will go into an injured state for the amount of time that we tell him to, and he also won't be able to move. So if you see, I'm trying to hold keys at this point, and it's only once the animation is done that he can continue. So if you were to hit him while he's walking, he will also stop walking, as you can see. So that is all determined by our hit stun time, and we determine our hit stun time based off of our attack from our hitbox. So to begin, let's go ahead and add some new C++ variables. I will say before we get started, we've done a lot to get to this point. I think this is the 22nd, maybe even the 23rd episode, so if you want to catch up on the series, I will leave a link in the iCard in the top right corner to go to the second episode, because the first episode was just a demo of the fighting game tutorial. That way you can get started and catch up with us. Alright, so we are going to get started with the character state enum. We have added this from episode, I believe, 16 or so was around, and we ended up changing it a bit from e-directional input to e-character state. This used to just determine if we were holding left or right, but I decided it would be better to kind of have it so we could determine the state the player was in, such as jumping, moving left, moving right, default, meaning not moving, and I also added stunned and blocking. We're not going to do anything with blocking today, but I figured add it while we're here, because when you change an enum that is blueprint type, then blueprint will freak out if you're using it in there. I'd say about 90% of the time it will freak out. So I recommend changing and adding both of these right now if you plan on implementing blocking or blockstun in the future. But you do it at whatever pace you want. If you don't want to add that, that's fine. I will be using the VE stunned, which is essentially just the stunned state for block stun or hit stun. So I'd definitely add that. Okay. We are going to add some more functions as well. Begin stun and end stun. Essentially, begin stun is going to start stunning the player, and then set the timer for when to end the stun. That way they can start moving again. And you can see everything else is the same. There's no booleans for is stun or anything, but we are going to add the two things we need to begin the stun and end the stun. So we need a float stun time, and as the comment says, it's the amount of time the character will be stunned. So this goes for all stuns, essentially, that you can think of, or at least that I could think of. It's basically the amount of time we want our player to not be able to do anything after they enter their hit stun state. And then stun timer handle right here. This doesn't need to be uProperty or anything. Essentially, this is a timer in Blueprint. It is literally a timer handle. So we need to use this just to call a function we're going to call. I can't remember if we've used it earlier in the fighting game tutorial, but it's a very, very powerful tool if used correctly, and we can use this to determine how long our player should be stunned for. So stun time, float stun time, F timer handle, stun time handle, and then make sure you add begin stun, end stun. Last thing, we want to make sure that our take damage function now takes in a float hit stun time, and this should probably be changed to stun time, since I was referring to everything else as stun time. So I will change that, but I'll change it after so I don't have to build. But essentially, add a new variable to your take damage function. That way we know how long to stun for, because we were calling the take damage function from the hitbox actor in BP in the blueprint, You don't have to do that. If you do decide to do that, we want to be able to send our hit stun time over to our take damage function. Either way, it's probably a good idea because only if you take damage are you going to use the hit stun time. We will also include a block stun time if we're going to separate the two, if the hit stun and block stun are going to be separate from each other in terms of their frames. Alright, so go ahead and set anything that you want to set. You don't need to set your timer handle to anything, but you can. I'd recommend just setting your stun time to 0 by default in the constructor. Then, if you go down to your new functions, so go to wherever you want to make them. I scrolled all the way down to right below take damage, and you can see I've also added my hit stun time. We'll go over take damage in a second. Let's go over what the new functions are going to do. That way we can kind of mix everything together. So make your new functions. Begin stun and end stun, they don't have any parameters in them. Essentially, once begin stun is called, we're going to stop our player from being able to move. Now, can move we determined in other episodes, but it stops our character from doing just that. The move right function does not work if can move is not true. Same with the jumping, actually. Jump only works if can move is true. So basically, can move is checking and saying, okay, we can't crouch, jump, or move right if our can move is false. So when we're stunned and we don't want to be able to do those things, we just set can move to be false. Then we call this long line, which is actually pretty simple, but it's very confusing for someone who's never used it before. This always used to confuse me, so I'm going to kind of go over it in depth here. So get world, get timer manager. Get world just literally gets a world pointer from the actor that the level that the actor is spawned in. Get timer manager. Timer manager is an Unreal instance that literally just exists within this world. Unreal does it automatically for you. And then we want to set timer. So the set timer function allows us to perform an action, such as call a function, when a timer has run out. For this is where you need your timer handle. Thus, the stun timer handle goes in as the first parameter. This is fine, just keep it as this. It means this class that we are in. And then we go to the function we want to call. Mine is end stun. So once the timer runs out, once the stun timer handle decreases the stun time to 0, then we want to call the end stun function. Make sense? This can stay false. I've said this in another episode. I don't even know what it does. I should look it up. I should just look at the set timer function. Just leave it at false. It's fine. It's fine. We're just going to wing it. I'll figure out what this does and leave it in the description. But I've never had to set this to true, so I think it's okay to set that to false. Okay. Yeah, so basically, here's your handle. Here's the function you're going to call once the timer is up. And then here's the timer. Remember, our stun time, or excuse me, here's the time, not the timer. Here's the time that it's going to take to to call this function, essentially. So we're going to set this different from every single hitbox. Every hitbox we spawn could have a different hit stun time or block stun time. They don't have to. You can make them all the same. For now, I only have one, but you'll see where we set that later. Just set this up now. So we're going to call end stun once our timer is done. So if we set up our end stun function right here, we're going to set our character state back to default, not moving. When he's in the not moving state, essentially he can go to any state from there. So when he is done with his stun, he goes back to his original position, original state, and then he can move again. He can move, crouch, jump, attack, all that good stuff again. Alrighty. Lastly, in our take damage function, we want to make sure we actually call our begin stun function. So the way this is going to work, with our new variables, I now have float hit stun time in here. I want to, on take damage, the character state should now be our new state, stunned. Then, we want to set our stun time to our hit stun time. So our stun time is the new parameter that we're bringing into this function. The reason I'm separating it like this is you could have a float block stun time as well, which we probably will, because block stun time and hit stun time can be separate. So we'll have to check if the player is blocking or not. So keep stun time as one variable, but make sure you separate the variables coming in. We'll check if the player is blocked and then set the stun time to the proper variable. But for now, stun time equals hit stun time. And then we just call our begin stun function, if I could talk. in begin stun, we're using our stun time that we just set right here, which was our hit stun time. And then the process begins. So that's all we have to do for the code side of things. You can see I haven't changed anything else, which means we should go into our blueprint now. You can see I have a new animation here, which is kind of like the take damage animation or hit stun animation, if you will. I did add anim notifies. They're not necessary at all. In fact, I'm not going to use them, but I wanted to show you that you can add notifies if you want to. At this part of the animation, he stops being able to move, or at this part, he begins being able to move. Sometimes characters even have counters and things like that you could actually trigger within your hit stun animation. If you press it within a certain amount of failed or missed frames, then you can activate it, things like that. So feel free to play around with this. We're not going to do anything, but here's the animation I'm going to be using. Okay, in the Hitbox Actor BP, now remember, this is where the hit stun time is actually going to occur, because this is where we call take damage. We check if there's a collision between the other player. So if we're player 1, we check if there's a collision between our hitbox and player 2, and vice versa. So here's where we're going to add hit stun time. We'll get to that in a second. I just wanted you to be aware of it. We have to actually set it when we create the hitbox. So right now we only have one attack, right? Attack started, attack active. And in attack active is where we create our active hitbox and add our hit stun time. Now, essentially, for your fighting game, you'll probably have 30, 40 attacks for each character. If it's a fully fleshed out game, it's a lot of work. You'll have a lot of anim notifies, or you can use anim montages, which is something I'll get into in another episode. But either way, you're going to have a lot of these. And every time you will have to set the hit stun time separately. Now, what I'm doing here is very poor. I should make this a parameter, hit stun time, and I'm going to. But I just wanted to show you the process like I did in the other episodes before doing this. That way it makes as much sense as possible when you first see it. So this is a function, create active hitbox. If you're not familiar with it, it's right here, create active hitbox. So you just hit plus, add a new function. In here, I'm spawning the actor, setting the owner, setting the type like proximity, active, all that stuff, setting the damage, and then setting the location. Spawning the hitbox, and then clearing out any actors we don't need, and then adding new ones that we do need. Well, here, I'm also going to set the hit stun time for this hitbox now. Now again, this will, next episode, this will be in a variable, or we can even do it now if you want to see how it should work. So you can do hit stun time, like this. Make sure it's a float, and then just drag it in to your hit stun time right here. You can see hit stun time is coming from the actor BP. This is because this hit stun time that you see here is actually the hit stun time from the hitbox actor. So we had this stuff in here. In hitbox actor, you can do this in a BP or C++ class, whatever you choose to do. But we had all these variables set up. We had hitbox damage, hit stun time, block stun time, all this stuff. Add it now. And lastly, just set your variables to be the defaults. So hitbox damage, hit stun time, and block stun time I all set to be 0. There you go. Build compile if you're adding them now. Go to your hit stun time right here. And just set it to the parameter from here, from your create active hitbox. If you want to make it neat, you can double click on any point of this line. And this isn't going to be too neat. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it right now, but just to show you, you can do this cool little trick. Something like that. And I don't know if this is straight or not, so I can right click and do, usually I can. Okay, for some reason it won't let me this time. That's very nice of it. Usually you can straighten connection, but maybe they're perfectly straight is what it is. That's weird. Anyway, so there you go. Now you have your hit stun time being routed down here, and then going to your hit stun time. Now make sure when you do this that in the event graph you actually set a hit stun time for it though. So I was setting it to 0.5 before, so we want to set it to 0.5 here instead. So if you had 30 of these, you just fill out your parameters, it does the logic for you. And there you go. Now, if we go back to our hitbox actor BP, here's the hit stun time. We literally just set it. So, oh, I put in hitbox damage here. I just realized that this would not work for a second player. Let's fix that. But see, mistakes can always happen, no matter what. So don't get discouraged. I'm gonna leave that in there instead of editing that out, so you can see that I made a simple mistake like that, but that would screw me over very much. So now that we go to our hitbox actor BP, like I said, we have our hit stun time that we just set in here. This is our hit stun time, which actually I'm gonna make this lowercase because it was annoying me that it was inconsistent. There we go. And you can see we set our hit stun time from the hitbox actor code class right here. This guy right here. All right. So this hit stun time that we set, meaning this value we put in here as the parameter, will now be in the hitbox actor BP as our hit stun time. You don't have to do anything else with it anywhere else in the file. We just set it. Intake damage, we give it our damage amount and our hit stun time. Now, since you added the hit stun time variable to the take damage function, make sure you refresh your node after you've built and compiled, and it should show up. If it doesn't, you can take out the node entirely. Just call take damage, or off your player, take damage, then do it again. You should have both nodes this time. If it still doesn't show up for any reason, try building Visual Studio. Go over here, build, and then go back into Unreal and compile again, and then refresh it. If it still doesn't work, let me know. There are some times when Unreal does not like to work with building and compiling of new additions to already existing things like variables, functions, or enums. So, you know, there's some ways to fix it, but that should do it if Unreal is feeling cooperative on that day. Alright guys, and then now our take damage function has the hit stun time we need. The user uses an attack. They have an animation set to the attack in the state machine. You're going to see these red little boxes. These are just shared transitions, don't worry. They're nothing that you have to really learn. They're the same as regular transitions. Shared transitions allow the same transition rules to apply. That way you don't have to rewrite the rules every time. I'll show you how to do it. What we're going to do is add, I called it high hit reaction. You could call it hit reaction or just even hit stun or whatever you want. Take damage, it doesn't matter. Here's your state. Your state is going to take in your animation. My animation is this. So go to this. Drag in your animation you want. Mine is called stomach hit right here. And literally just drag it in from this side. Okay, and what we're going to do here is the play rate basis of this animation. So if you click on the animation, go over to details, settings, play rate basis, and expose it like this, you can plug something into it. It'll be 1 by default. This is the play rate basis. So what it means, I'll let you read this, but essentially what it means is the play rate will now, this will be the new standard for this animation. So what we want is to scale the animation to play at the rate of which we have stun time. Meaning, as soon as my stun time is done, we want to be able to allow our character's animation to finish at that point. So if we take this out and we set our play rate basis to 3, it's going to be 3 seconds instead of the 0.5 that we set. You will see that the animation plays much slower. Bam. And he also can't move until the hit stun time is done. So it ends right around there, and then you can move again, or a little bit earlier, like probably right around there. Yep. So there you go. So the hit stun time is still the 0.5. But if your hit stun time was 3 here, then your play rate basis would be 3. Make sense? There we go. So if we put these together, now the stun time will definitely line up with the play rate basis. That means the animation will not finish until the hit stun time is done. And basically, the hit stun time will run out when the animation is done. Okay? So if these are separate, or if you just left this at 1 and let it play, then you'll see that this goes for 1 second. The animation goes the entire duration of itself, 1 times itself, but the hit stun time ends before. I can start moving before the animation is done, because my hit stun time doesn't line up with my play rate basis. So there you go. That's a good way to clean that up. And the transition rule for it is literally just check if the character state is stunned. It's that simple. So get your character reference, get your character state enum, do equals equals, it's this one right here, equal enum, and then do the drop down, check if it's stunned. If it is stunned, you will enter your hit reaction. I've only done this for idle, walking forward, and walking backward. You could do it for others. You could also include different reactions, like if they're jumping, do an air one, or if they're in the middle of attack, do some sort of, counter. All that stuff's fine. But here's how you do a shared thing between them. So you could just do walking backward to high hit reaction and do this logic every time. Or, to make your life easy, if you have the same transition rules for multiple transitions, click on one. You have to set up one. So we set up our first one here, idle to high hit reaction. Then what we want to do is go over here to details, transition, and hit share transition rule sharing, and we'll make a rule. So you'll have to go to one where it'll look like this originally if you haven't done it. Hit promote to shared, and then it'll ask you to put in a name. I called mine high hit reaction. Then when you make all your other transitions, so walking forward to high hit reaction, walking backward to high hit reaction, when you click on them, like so, then you go to transition rule sharing and select your rule that you just made, high hit reaction. All the shared ones will show up the same color. In this case, they're red. You can actually change that, but that's not important right now. And there you go. Now these are all the same transition rule, but I only had to set up one of these, so it saved me time. Alright guys, so you create your active hitbox, set our hit stun time. Our state machine is playing the correct animation, all good to go. We spawn our hitbox in the create active hitbox function right here. So in the hitbox actor, he's created, he determines which player he comes from, and then he goes and checks if he's overlapping with the other player. Then if he is, that player takes damage and adds hit stun time. Then, intake damage, we say, okay, this guy took damage and we have hit stun time above 0, or it doesn't matter if you have above 0 or not, but if you have 0, then this isn't going to do anything, so it's basically saying, if the hit stun time is above 0, start a timer, make sure he can't move while this timer is still going, use the stun time that we have for our timer, and then end the stun once the timer is completed. Once the stun has been ended, reset his state from stunned and allow him to be able to move again. And that's essentially the entire flow of hit stun. It's basically the same flow for block stun, but again, we will be doing blocking in a very, very soon episode, so we'll cover that then. Blocking and block stun in the same episode. There you go, guys. That's everything you really need to know to be able to implement hit stun and block stun in your game. So if this video helped you, please subscribe. It helps more than anything else you can do for this channel and just lets me know that I'm doing a good job or helping you out. If you have any questions or had any issues with the tutorial or just have any things you want to recommend, then feel free to join the Discord. I can't link it in an iCard because YouTube is kind of weird, but if you want to do that, we have a wonderful community and I'd be happy to help you. Send pictures, videos, anything you need to be able to solve any of the problems you have following this tutorial. As always, there's always things I could do better, so feel free to call me out on them. You know, it's totally cool. I'm trying to set up a beginner playlist here, so nothing wrong with saying here are ways you can do this or here's how I did it. We're all learning together, so that's good. Lastly, guys, if you want to join us on something other than YouTube, you can come check us out on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. Someone took my name, so I'm Shawnthebro27 instead of Shawnthebro. Long story. Anyway, if you'd like to come support us, we do Souls Wednesday, which is a bunch of like Dark Souls and Bloodborne games, and me struggling to get through them because I've never played them before. Lastly, we usually do Horror Games Friday, which usually becomes Resident Evil Friday, but last time it was Layers of Fear Friday. And yeah, that's all. Give us some support, give us some love, whatever you want to do. Most importantly, guys, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one where we cover blocking and blockstun. Bye, guys.